Hi, Aaron Maurer is our guest this evening. Grew up in the Inland Empire and moved up to the Santa Clarita area and then up to Lancaster here. He's been with the Highway Patrol now for 15 years. 15? And he's a friend of the club. You see him out shooting airplanes as much as we are. And he's also, are you the PIO?
Yes, sir.
He's the Public Information Officer for the Mojave office where he works. And when he's not out doing CHP type stuff, he's taking incredible images of the CHP cars and the different scenes he comes upon and the aircraft and whatnot. It just seemed like a natural thing to have us come talk to us because a bunch of us have an interest in doing that kind of photography. So he was kind enough to come up and donate his time to come talk to us. So when he's not out chasing around and taking pictures and doing his CHP stuff, he's also a father to 8 incredible kids. So he goes home to relax, I'm sure. Here's
Just want to say thank you all for inviting me here tonight. You know, it's a joy to come talk to you. I see a lot of familiar faces in the room out here that I've seen out. You mentioned getting airplanes, getting photographs of airplanes. That's where my passion is, besides work and kids and family. So it's been a lot of fun getting to meet and know quite a few of you in the room here today. So, ultimately, we're going to talk about safety around emergency zones, natural disasters like fires, because we've been having quite a few of them recently. And I know a lot of you out there like to go get pictures, trying to get the helicopters dropping water, the air tankers dropping phosgenic. But then we don't want to get yelled at by, by law enforcement or fire department personnel. But I'll give you a little bit of background. You mentioned it. My name is Aaron Maurer, but if you look me up on Facebook, it's Aaron Smith. It's because I have 8 kids and they're all through adoption. So biological families haven't been that welcoming of this. So changed the last name and that seemed to do the trick as far as any Facebook stalking. So that's why there's a difference. It confuses a lot of people, but just to explain that. And that's also why in Maurer 8 photography, why I have the number 8 in there. I'm not actually eating cameras, but tribute to my kids, just because I've got 8 of them and they are my life. So, little background for me, photography. My dad was into it. He had a Nikon, old Nikon FE, if I remember correctly, and back in the film days. And so I used to sit alongside of him on road trips and take pictures just like he did. And he eventually gave me his camera, and it's in lens and still sitting in my safe at home. That's where I learned. Kind of as I got older, put away the camera, life moved on. Got married, started with the Highway Patrol, and then 2020 came around, and there's a lot of spare time, to say the least. So decided, well, I need to find hobbies. What do I do? And pulled out an old camera and started taking pictures again, and realized, man, this is a lot of fun. So we're going to keep doing this. And at work, you know, we were fairly limited at work because I like Andrew mentioned, I'm the public information officer for the CHP Mojave area. Limited during that time on what we could do. It's like, well, let's start taking pictures of patrol cars. You know, let's start taking pictures of emergency vehicles, you know, when at crashes or at fires, wherever we happen to be, and let's just have some fun with it. So that's kind of where things picked up. I have been with the CHP since 2008, and I've been working out of the Mojave area up in Kern County since 2018, and been public information officer since 2019. Out of that area, and it's worked out pretty well. So when I first started, I was thinking landscape or aviation, what do I do? Because both are pretty awesome. And having at the office, if you're familiar with Mojave, our back lot is up against the airport, and there's always something flying. And so that really caught my attention. I couldn't pass that up. And now whenever we hear a rumble at the office, everybody knows I'm going to run out the door and see what's out there. So that's expected. So aviation and with the side of landscape is kind of what I focus on. You froze up on me here. Let's see, sorry. One moment here. There we go. Okay, so while we're here, right, I was asked to come in and talk about safety and laws around natural disasters, fires, stuff like that, to make sure that we're all safe when we're out there, make sure that we're doing things properly, legally, and just like above all, I keep mentioning it, but that we're safe, right? we're safe ourselves, and we're keeping everybody around us safe and giving emergency workers room to work. So this is kind of the topics that we're going to look at tonight. Some laws. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with them, as far as the penal code, as far as allowing journalists and into closed areas, and then also what the consequences if you're not and you cross a line, what the consequences can be, and then how to respond, safety inside the closed area, and then also how to include emergency vehicles in pictures, right? Even my own department, I love my department, right? I love the California Highway Patrol, but some of the stuff that their pictures, I feel like, they could improve upon a little bit, right? I get really picky with this stuff, and I'll get into that farther on. We'll talk about this. And if I could take a sidestep, you mentioned Bodie. So going out to Bodie, I had a funny story last year. I had the opportunity to take a patrol vehicle up to the Bridgeport area to help them with recruitment and photography of the vehicle. And I think they set me up on purpose for this, because they told me, go into Bodie at night, take some pictures of the car under the stars. No one's living there. You'll be all by yourself. It's totally fine, completely fine. So what do? You know, I take them at their word, and I take a car up there, I go through the gate, and I'm driving around, I'm shining my spotlights on all the buildings, I turn on my lights, I'm taking pictures, and then I start seeing headlights up in the distance, up on a hill. It's like, what is, that's kind of weird. Like, why would anybody else be out here? You know, so little red flags going off, and the headlights come closer, and then all the park rangers come out. Who's out here? So anyway, we exchanged some challenge coins and shook some hands and made friends at that point. But kind of you reminded me of that when you mentioned going up to Bodie. So make sure you check with the park rangers, especially if you're going out there at night, because they do live there and they do patrol at night. So something kind of fun. Go. Okay, so Penal Code 409.5A says, I'm going to summarize it. When there's a natural disaster, law enforcement can close off an area, right? That's why you see us. I work for the CHP. We close a lot of roads alongside the sheriff's department. You get a brush fire out there on, 60th or 100th or 200th east, west, wherever it happens to be, and we'll start closing the roads because that's what we're allowed to do, to give fire department personnel or medical personnel or whoever the room to do their job without interference from the general public. Because I'm sure you've all seen at a road closure how many cars back up at that point, because everybody's just coming, they want to get their picture, they want to get their video. A lot of them have no business being around there. It also attracts a lot of people, which we'll talk about, that are looking to take advantage of others, whether it be stealing from cars or stealing from homes. So we shut it down, right? It's a misdemeanor if you're crossed that line without proper authorization, right? So what is authorization, right? How do you get through that to get inside and get pictures, right? And that's just being a journalist or a member of the media and having a press pass, something like that, requires us as law enforcement to let you through that closure. Because media cannot be denied access to a natural disaster unless it's some form of crime scene, right? Then a crime scene, then no one can get in, right? Because that's a whole different ballgame. But stuff like fires, if you're a member of the media, member of the press, you're a journalist, whatever it happens to be, you have to be allowed access to a natural disaster, a fire, an earthquake, a flood, whatever it happens to be, right? And that all falls under this Penal Code 409.5A. And that does include, which some people get hung up on, command posts, right? When we set up a command post, sometimes people like to come in there and kind of get in our business. That is off limits to everyone, press included, okay? When we do close an area, make it a crime scene, say it's a traffic collision, which I deal with most of the time, right? And somebody dies, so now it's a crime scene, right? So we deny entry to everyone because we have to preserve the scene, tire tread, marks, physical evidence, taillights, stuff like that, right? We are obligated to also designate a space for members of the press to gather to get information later. So we'll say, sure, down at this corner or at this, this is where someone will come talk to you when we're done. But we're obligated to share that, to provide that space for people. Go to this next screen here. So I actually screenshotted something for you guys. You can take a picture if you want to. I'll step out of the light. So this is our media guide, and also the LA County Sheriff's Department media guide, as far as allowing press into a. I'm going to step out of the way here. as far as allowing press into the scene of a natural disaster, right? So both departments have training on it. We do training. In fact, I just did some training at our own office on what to do when you're at a fire, because especially in Kern County, I mean, we're up say 1,500 starts this year already in Kern County, which is an enormous number of fires. So it's happening a lot. So what do we do when we're at a closure and someone comes up and says, hey, I'm a member of the media, I'm a photojournalist, I'm whatever, whatever it is. We're obligated to let them through, okay? To take pictures and document it and report it to the news. Now, that doesn't mean just anyone can show up and say, I'm a member of the media. There has to be some, because people try that, there has to be some form of what is this going to be used for? Besides just a personal use, right? There has to be some form where this is going to be used. You have a business, you have a magazine, you have a newspaper, you have somebody that you're sharing this with that's going to put this out there and allow for the news to be shared, to be documented, right? What's happening out there. But this is just a kind of what we say in there, and it mirrors what the law says, that members of the media, will be allowed access to natural disaster scenes unless it's designated a crime scene because for whatever reason, in which case we provide a meeting location. And it says that for both departments.
Would being a member of the Lancaster Photography Association be?
You could try, you're more than welcome to try. I'll go to the next screen here and I'll show you. So when I'm off duty, when I'm not in uniform, right? I don't identify myself when I go out to these fires or go do what I need to do. I'm not identifying myself as, hey, guess what? I'm CHP. Can I get through here? Can I get special privilege? I'm just like everybody else. I'm great. When I go talk to, especially with the sheriff's department, they don't know who I am. The guys down out here do in Antelope Valley, the CHP guys do, but none of the sheriff's department know. So when I go to them and I'm telling them, hey, this is what I do, I come prepared. A lot of times I have a press pass for a magazine, so I always use that. I always try to keep a hat for the magazine and a shirt for the magazine with me. That's why I mentioned, before approaching at a closure, you get to this point where the road's closed and you want to get through to take pictures. If you have media, press, photojournalist credentials, whatever you have it prepared, have it ready. Business cards, those are great because, hey, look, I'm a business. This is what I do. Those are fairly easy to make. That helps sell your case, right? And get you into where you need to be to document stuff. Apparel with your logo on it, right? I just made a shirt the other day online. It was like 15 bucks. And I put my Maurer photography on it and a picture of a jet, right? It's not that hard. That way, when you show up at a scene, at a closure, you look professional, right? Because you want to act professional. At least I do. I want to be prepared and I want to be professional so that they realize I'm not just someone trying to get their, 10 seconds of fame on TikTok or Snapchat or whatever, Instagram Reels, that I'm actually doing this to document and make some money as a business on the side, right? So I get, pull up your social media on your Instagram, your Facebook, so that they can see it. Be prepared to talk to them. Don't be afraid to talk, okay? A lot of people get intimidated and they see a police car flashing lights and the officer, or deputy telling everybody to turn around. Don't be intimidated. Go up there and show what you have and say, hey, look, this is my business. I'm here to document the fire. Can I get through? Don't be afraid to do that, because we get that a lot where you see somebody standing, 20 feet back and they keep looking at you and you're looking back at them and it's like, well, what are we doing here? What's going on? And really all it is they want to get in because they have a right to be in there, but they're too afraid to talk. Don't be afraid to talk to us. I can't speak for everybody. I love talking to people. That's why I'm here today. But I'll have that conversation. I teach our guys too up in Mojave where I work. In fact, we just had this training. Look for these things. If somebody comes up and is trying to get through a closure, look for these things. This is what you're going to ask for. One of my friends who also does photography, he's not here tonight, did exactly this at a fire up off Tehachapi, Willow Springs, and Oak Creek up in the windmills, and got some phenomenal shots of the CAL FIRE S2Ts diving in the windmills and dropping some phosjet. But he went in there and he said, hey, look, officer, this is what I do. And he didn't throw down my name. This is what I do. I'd like to document the fire and so I can report on it. Go right ahead. Be careful. Okay, and we'll talk about that warning too. You have to be very, very careful, and that's what we're gonna hit hard on here in a minute. So what happens if they do tell you, say you're at the closure and you get told, you get turned away? Because I've been turned away myself from not only my own department, but the sheriff's department as well, you know, because some people just don't know, just don't care, are in a hurry. You know, I hate to say things like that, but it happens. Not everybody's perfect and not everybody has the training they need to do this. So I always make the best of the situation, right? I'll try to include the car in the picture, maybe with the fire in the background, you know, be creative with it. You know, I'm not gonna get through here. You know, don't argue, never, never, ever argue. If you really have a beef, take it up with the supervisor or the office at a later date. You know, you're there at a situation right now where you want to document stuff, so don't waste time with that. You know, you can get a name, you can get an ID real quick, and then you can call the office, you know, the following Monday. You can talk to a supervisor later. Try a different location. You know, I found out that, hey, I'm glad I got turned away at this spot because I came over here and I see something I would have missed otherwise, and it turned out better. You know, so you never know. But that's all part of being prepared. You know, have that backup plan. What happens if I can't get through right here? You know, I hear in the desert too, we have a lot of dirt roads. And I would say we cannot close all of them, okay?
No,
That's a big-
I was gonna ask that. The one that was, out of, at like 100 and something east or west, it was closed off to go up into the windmills that way.
Mhm.
But there were dirt roads around there. Would I have been allowed to go on the dirt roads and then hit up with the pavement after the closure, or?
That's what I would do.
Okay.
I've in fact done that myself down
I
here.
thought-
Yeah. You might get talked to, but you know what? That road is not closed, right? That's right, that's where I go. And I do that frequently out here, you know, I've been turned around by, like I said, by the volunteers or by the sheriff's department. I just go down the road and find a dirt road around it. Out on, Avenue B, there was a fast moving brush fire out there. And the sheriff's department got there 30 seconds before I turned the corner. And then they said, no, you gotta go, the fire's coming this way. So that's fine, I'm not gonna argue. I turn around, I go back the way I came, loop back around and come in a dirt road, just north of it. And then I get fantastic stuff right from there, and it worked out really well. So in fact, better than being where I was, what made me think about it. So, yeah, and there's always other options. So, and keep trying, you know, don't ever give up just because you get stopped at one point, you know, but make sure that you also have proper, you're prepared, have your proper credentials, you have everything with you to show that you're doing this as a business and you're not just the guy down the street trying to get his 15 seconds of fame, you know, because there is a difference between documenting for reporting purposes and for just getting the news out of what's happening, and just someone out there who's doing, you know, like I said, just someone down the street probably shouldn't be there. So. So once you get inside, say you're led inside the closure, okay, what happens from there? The number one thing you always want, doesn't matter, I use the picture of a fire here because that's what we have the most of right now. Have an exit plan. Always, always, always have an exit plan. Be very careful of where the direction of the fire, which way it moves. I've been with LA County Fire at a fire. We set up a command post over here because the fire is going south. The fire at the time was going southwest. The winds changed, blew it north. Okay, we're still good. And then before you know it, the winds were now blowing towards the east. And that put it right into it and actually burned my uniform that day because it swept down the hill over at Agua Dulce, swept down the hill right over the command post where we were on Agua Dulce, just next to the freeway. And it burned over everything, the patrol car, the fire trucks, everything. It was just a split second, it was gone. And then it continued north towards Antelope Valley, just raging through the hills. And that took all about 30 seconds and we were all scrambling, fire department included. You know, they got their SUV and all the trucks with the command post set up and it turned bad very quickly. So make sure that you're always watching. When you go out there, you know, look for the wind. Where's the smoke blowing? You know, what are the fire trucks doing? You know, especially if they tend to be moving to be getting out, that's a clue, get out. You know, don't stick around if they're all leaving because they know something. They're more experienced than any of us in this room are. So they know what they're doing. If you stop to take pictures or get video or do whatever you're going to do, make sure that your vehicle is always facing out. You don't want to have to make a U-turn, especially on a narrow dirt road in an emergency. Make that while you have the time, so that if something happens, you can get out. Because you can always turn around again and keep going down the road. But if you stop, you always want to be pointed towards your exit. Because if something happens, you need to get in your car, you need to make sure it's going to go. You also want to make sure that if you're going into a natural disaster, that your vehicle is capable of doing that. I'll show you some pictures later, what I mean by that. If you're going off-roading in the dirt, make sure it's capable of that. Making sure that it's in good condition, okay? We've had people where, they get out there and their car breaks down and now they're out in the middle of a fire and they're asking for a tow truck, and that's not happening. Okay, we're not doing that. If you lose your car, you lose your car. That's on you at this point. Just be careful. I said that in the beginning, be careful, be safe. If someone from the fire department, even above us, comes and tells you to move, then move. You know, get out of the way, because they know something or they're doing something that we may not know about. And they're the ones they're trying to keep talking about fires. They're the ones that are trying to contain the fire, right? So listen to what they have to say. Never block a road or a driveway for that matter. Don't park in someone's driveway, because you don't know when the fire department's gonna need that driveway to get in there and save that house, right? Or the road, you know, find a shoulder, find a white spot to stop and turn. And, you know, if you have to miss the shot to get to a point where you can safely and legally stop, then do so. You know, don't ever stop and block the way of any emergency, because that's also the fastest way to get a free ride in the back of a police car. Okay, in a car on the back of a tow truck. If you inhibit what the fire department is doing, because all they have to do is say, hey, look, that car is blocking our way and that person's stopping us from doing what we need to do. You know, and then that's going to be an end of story for us. So be careful with that. And make sure to keep in mind that a lot of these fire trucks are very big. Okay, they're not little tiny cars like some people drive, right? They're big fire trucks. So if you're driving out on a road, or especially our dirt roads out here, make sure there's enough room that one of the big fire trucks can get through. So always be more careful than you need to be. Pay attention to your surroundings, right? Look for the responding emergency vehicles. Oftentimes we see animals running, you know, personal animals and wildlife. Okay. Residents, looters, I mean, they like to take advantage of this. They see a fire, we see it all the time, and they'll come buzzing through the desert, you know, and oh, I live right over there. You know, oh, who, you know, what other cars are should be in that house? Oh, well, I don't really know right now. You know, well, let me see the address on your license, and it's, you know, an address out of somewhere else, you know, down LA. It attracts, even the small fires attracts people. And with that said, be careful with your cars and your camera equipment if you do choose to go to any natural disasters, and take pictures, do some photography, because it takes them 15 seconds to break a window and grab a bag. Literally all it takes, and your stuff is gone. And they will take advantage of your cars, especially if you walk away from them. So stay with your vehicle. If you have to leave your vehicle, make sure that you have everything out of it that you want, because there's a chance it won't be there when you come back, even in these situations, because it's unfortunate the world we live in today, but that's the way it is. There's always people out there looking to take advantage of others, and they look for the weakest times, which natural disasters bring out, right? And people really need help. And that goes for residents, and that goes for people there trying to document it. It goes for first responders, you know. They'll walk up to a fire truck and take the turnouts out of the back of the fire truck and walk away. It's really sad, and it's really frustrating from a law enforcement perspective that when, you know, people are in need and bad things are happening, that there's someone there trying to take advantage of that. But it's our world, so we need you guys to also be careful and be cognizant of that. You know, don't leave camera gear sitting on your seat and then walk away to go get a shot. Even though you may not see anybody, it's amazing how fast people appear out of the desert. You know, I work up in Mojave in Kern County, and you don't see any headlights, or you don't see anybody for miles. Then you turn your back for 2 minutes and you look around, and all of a sudden there's somebody standing there. Where'd you come from? Like, this is magic here. I mean, I don't know. It's just crazy. So be careful. Be very, very careful.
One other thing.
Yes. Yes.
You showed a car parked to the side. Be very careful that the grasses are dry. Don't drive your car on the grasses. You can start another fire going from the other direction.
Right.
Yes, that's actually the top point on my next slide. So that's a perfect transition. Thank you. I love it. There we go. There we go. Thank you. I can give this to you now. Yeah, exactly. Don't stop on the dry brush or grass. Don't think that that's a valid place to park, to get out of the way of emergency vehicles, because it's amazing how fast a car can start a fire, with a hot engine. I've seen it in our own patrol cars. We had we had a pursuit, and it was on the 138, and the person goes off into the field. And so we pull off onto the shoulder, and one of our cars pulled just a little hair too far, and it was like that. You could start seeing smoke come up. And so it was immediately throw it in reverse, and get it back onto the road. But it happens very fast. So that's a very good point. It happens very, very fast. So make sure if you're going off into the desert that you're staying on dirt roads. Because even the small, short grass, that's 6 inches tall, when it gets underneath a very hot car, especially if your car is leaking anything, it can ignite that fuel very fast. And it's dry out there right now. Those grasses are dry. The trees may have a little bit more moisture content in them, and the bushes, but the grass out there is very dry. It's very easy to start a fire. If you're on the freeway and you see a fire starting, don't stop on the side of the freeway. That little white line, we stress this in every single class that I teach at work. That little white line is just a line, and people treat it like it's a wall, that because I'm on the shoulder of a freeway, no one's gonna hit me, it's totally fine. But that is how more of us as CHP officers are killed. It's from people driving on the shoulder. And it only makes it worse when there's a natural disaster, because people are getting out their cameras while they drive, they're not paying attention, but they still want to do 80 miles an hour down the freeway, or you just get someone that's drunk or reckless or impaired, or impatient, and they want to hit that shoulder and pass everybody at 80 miles an hour. And now you're stopped there to get a picture. Okay, don't ever stop. And even if I'm gonna grab a trail a little bit, don't ever stop your car anytime on the side of the freeway. Get off the freeway, drive it, get it off the freeway so that you stay safe. That's your best option, especially with natural disasters like fires. We don't need to be sitting on the side of the freeway with traffic moving 80, 90 miles an hour. Get off the freeway and find another spot. If you're inside where there's a closure, that could be a little bit different. But I'd still be very careful, because people still go through closures. We just had a couple Caltrans workers that got hit because someone went through a closure. So just the orange cones don't mean anything either. So be very careful on the freeway, or any road for that matter. If you're driving through the desert, make sure that your car is off-road ready. Okay, make sure it can handle the trails or wherever you're going. If you're not familiar with that road, I suggest that probably stay off of it. Simply because you don't know how rough it's going to get, and especially if a fire truck comes up behind you or in front of you, you don't want to be in their way, and you don't want to have to block the road or get stuck, because then that gets us involved, and I don't like being involved in that stuff. Okay, I want to see everybody get what they want as far as photography, recording, video, but I also want to see everybody be safe and do it responsibly. It's like I said down there, maps are your friend. Take a moment, take a breath. I know there's a lot of anxiousness, at least on my part. Like I fear, like, oh no, if I don't do it right now, I'm gonna miss it. I'm gonna miss it. I'm gonna miss it. I get real excited and I get in a hurry. But if you just stop and look at a map and really look at it, like, okay, I see this road. It's doing this. It's doing that. It looks like I can take it. This one I'm not so sure on, so I'm gonna stay off of it. And if I know it's more than what my truck can handle or whatever car I'm driving, and just find another way or find a different angle, a different perspective to document. It's not worth blocking road or getting stuck and hurting yourself or someone else out there, just because just for some photos or some videos. Just be careful. Like I said in the beginning, be safe. It's all about being safe and making responsible choices. And I know I get out there at the fires and I see the helicopters coming in and the tankers coming in, and I'm just thinking, man, I gotta get this. I gotta hurry. And it's good just to slow it down. Take a minute, look around, look at your surroundings, see where fire trucks are going, and check your maps, especially if you're not familiar with it. Biggest caveat, once you get inside a closure, or even if you go around a closure, because we've found that dirt road, realize that you're all at these things at your own risk. Bad things happen, like I mentioned, even when you're at a command post. Bad things happen very quickly. People get hurt very quickly. So you're there at your own risk, and we may not be there as quickly as we normally would because of whatever natural disaster is going on. It could take extra time, you know, if something bad happens. And a lot of times, I don't know if any of you have noticed it, but when I'm out of fire and I'm trying to take pictures and we'll get a video, and then I try to send someone a text or I try to call someone, my cell reception's terrible. You know, a lot of times they're in remote locations. A lot of times now all the first responders are out there on their phones too, and it's clogging up the network out there. What network there is, and it's hard to get out if you need help. So be cognizant of that when you're out there taking pictures. That once you enter that area where things are happening very rapidly and it's a dynamic situation, that you could be on your own for a little bit. So be cognizant of that. Like I keep first aid kit in my car and other equipment that I know I may need, you know, shovels, stuff like that in case something happens, so I can try to help myself. Because once you're in there on your own, like when I'm not working, I'm in there on my own. That's it. I know I may not have help for a little while. So be very, very careful and realize you're there at your own risk. Hence these next two pictures, right? It goes from professional reporters, news photographers to somebody just trying to get a picture. All right, the top one is actually the Channel 7 news van at a fire off Golden Valley, shoot, probably a decade ago now. They fire changed directions on the 14th, but they had walked away from their van. So when it changed direction, they couldn't get back to their van. So this is what happened to it. And we had warned them, like we always warn everybody, look, you can go in here, you can enter, but you're here at your own risk. We will be there to help you, but it may take extra time. They ended up losing their whole van on the side of the freeway up there. So it happens even to, you know, the really professionals that do this for a living. Fires especially change directions fast, and it's very dynamic and can be very dangerous. So we all want to be careful. The second one is someone that tried to stop on the shoulder, try to get out of the way for fire equipment. They traveled about 5 miles up a dirt road they didn't know, up Sand Canyon when they're at Sand Canyon in Santa Clarita when there was a big fire, and they got their vehicle high centered. It still ended up kind of blocking the road. So we got the call to go up there and tow the vehicle. So that's what that second fire is, way at the top of the mountain. Can't remember what the dirt road was called or what the fire trail was, but they still didn't do it. What's that?
Dirt road.
Yeah, dirt road. And what's unique, so you'll notice this road is actually plowed by bulldozers, right? As a fire break for the fire. It still went right over it. But something that I didn't realize when I was responding up to this is once they plow it, that is very, very soft sand. It is not easy to drive on. So I say that, keep that in mind. If you happen to see like a break that they've already done, maybe the fire's moved through and you still want to get up there and take some pictures. That dirt is very, very, I mean, you see the back of the patrol car, it's just covered in that soft dust, that really fine sand. So it can be a very tricky road to traverse. Not as easy as a lot of people think. But it really doesn't matter who you are, you know, professional or not professional, you have to be careful because it can happen to anybody. Is the point I'm trying to make. It really doesn't matter. So always watch your back, always watch where the fire is going, always watch where the wind's blowing. And if somebody's saying go, then get out of here. I've got a great video of, I didn't put it in this because I didn't want to do videos, but recently there's a fire on 60th West and K that blew up close to some homes over there. And right before it crossed over K, they were yelling at people where the closure was set up. We gotta go, get the closure back. The fire's coming. And it took about a minute and the fire was already down where the road had originally been closed. And so it moves very quickly. So, but you can hear them yelling at them over the PA to tell everybody, get out of here, the fire's coming. So it's really, really important to listen to instructions like that when you get them. So also something else to keep in mind when you're driving around these areas, stay focused while you're driving. Watch out for people, watch out for residents, watch out for animals. Like I said, people that don't need to be there necessarily either. I can't tell you how many times I've been at one of these and I'm sitting in a closure and then there's a crash right in front of me, you know, because someone's not paying attention, you know. we had one last year, pretty significant crash. Somebody coming out of dirt road because they were trying to get around and just blew right across, I believe it was Avenue J, down around 70th, 80th, somewhere down in there, 90th west. Except they pulled out right in front of a car that had the right of way. And literally right in front of me got T-boned by this car because they didn't stop. All because they're paying attention to the fire and smoke and all this activity. Thought it was so cool. I gotta go take a look. And then they end up crashing. They hurt themselves. They hurt the poor lady that was in the car in front of me. So be careful of all that. Be very careful. A lot of times too, you'll see, I've run into this when I'm not on duty, but I get inside the closure and I'm taking pictures of the fire and it's like a wall of smoke. And then the car comes just barreling out of it because they're fleeing their house. You know, they're running. They're not paying attention. They're you know, their mind's running in a million different directions. Rightfully so, right? Because they're potentially losing their home right now. So they're not going to see you standing on that road. And, you know, they're just barreling right by me, you know, at 70 miles an hour down this dirt road just to get away because they're fleeing for their life. So be careful of stuff like that. Like I said before, watch out for emergency personnel coming and going. Distracted drivers who don't belong there. I keep saying that because we all see it when the road gets closed. You get 50 people standing in the road asking questions, what's going on? Or, you know, is the road closed? You know, everybody asks that. That's always, or why is the road closed? That's the other funny one. Even though there's a big wall of black smoke behind us and flames, you know, why is the road closed? I can't get through, you know, but I live right there. That's always a common one. I live right there. I live right there. You know, we hear that when people are drunk too, you know, but I live right there. It's okay. But it's not, in either case. So just be careful, you know, in all these situations, you know, I focus because of what I do. I focus more on driving safety. Behind the wheel, always turning around and watching and you don't get too carried away with looking at the viewfinder or looking at that screen. You know, make sure that you're taking time to look up, look around. You never know what you're going to miss, but you also never know who's going to come up behind you. You may not see another situation arising. So make sure that you're always looking around and just being cognizant of what's happening. I said, I mean, I can't tell you how many times people have crashed in front of me at a closure. You know, somebody coming up and they decide they just want to make a U-turn because they see the road closed sign and they pull out in front of someone and cut someone off. Or they hit the person walking across the street that's trying to ask us a question. You know, that's happened too. So just be very, very careful. Like I said at the bottom, slow down. If you're going to anything to photograph it, to get videos, you know, I get it. I get the rush, the adrenaline of being out there and getting to see stuff and document it, report on it. But the most important thing is that we're all safe. And the best way to do that is just by slowing down and taking a breath and kind of looking around, looking for movement. You know, I've been out to floods and you always want to watch what's going on up in the mountains, right? Look for the rain up on the hill. We recently had the, talking about floods, I think the picture is going to show up here in a minute, but 58 was closed last winter for several days, a year ago.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, yes. So it's important. I mean, that happened very quick. I saw a video of it actually happening. And it's amazing that when that water, once it started coming, there was a big rig that got stuck there in the mud and he had no chance. You know, no one knew anything. And then all of a sudden there's feet of mud on the road. It happens very fast. The other car that got stuck, I'll show you this picture here in a minute. That was through their own fault. But, be careful, be cognizant, whatever it happens to be, whether it's floods or fires, dust storms out here, which happen, whatever you're documenting, just be careful with it. You know, take a moment, look around. I'll talk a little bit. I mentioned in the beginning, photograph emergency vehicles, how to include them in this. Like I mentioned, I feel like even my own department could just tweak it just a little bit to make it better. Because one of my pet peeves, and you'll see it in this picture here, if you look, is getting all the lights on in the car, right? Getting all the lights on. It's not as easy as it looks, because if you know LEDs, then you know, like in this next picture too, right? Getting all the lights on, the fire in the background. LEDs on our patrol vehicles, even though our eyes see them as solid lights in the car, it's solid in both these pictures. When you go to take a picture or when you do a video, a lot of times, yes, it flashes. Okay, so if I do my high shutter speed, you know, thousandths of a second, 2,000ths of a second, because I want to get the action going, it may only get one light or it may get no lights, even though I visually see all the lights on the car. So what I found, at least with the equipment that I use, is I slow it all the way down to 1/100 to get, that way it's a guaranteed shot that I'm gonna get all the lights on in the car. And a lot of times that means, you know, I like increasing the f-stop on there, so I also get that, when I turn on the headlights, I get that burst, that star burst, right, of the headlights. I love seeing that in the cars. What's that?
Don't have the headlights.
I know, that's not my car. That's my partner's car, otherwise they would be on. I get picky about this stuff, because this is part of what I do. Let's see if he had it in this, see if I can go back. There they are, they're on this one too. They are on in that last one. But this one, you're right, they are not on. So here's the flood picture I was talking about too. So I like to do, you know, is just slow down the shutter speed. I kind of mentioned about halfway down that page. 1/100th is my sweet spot for our LED lights. If you look at fire department, sometimes you need to slow it down even more, because theirs flash at a different rate than ours do. What that also allows you to do is, it's kind of cool when you get the fire truck moving, because then you create some panning action in there, you know, and you get all the lights on the patrol car. So it's kind of cool. When you do increase the shutter speed, you can, not always, you can start losing those lights, getting all of them on. But I'm picky like that. I don't like sharing a picture unless all the lights of the car are on. I like to see it all. So that's just me. And like I mentioned, that's the one thing I wish you know, I love my department, I do, but I wish they'd slow down their shutter speed when they take pictures up north, so they get all the lights on the car, because there's usually one that's not, and you know, I start twitching and you know, I want to fix that.
All departments in the state and show them.
I did have, so what this photography's allowed me to do, and I'm gonna rabbit trails, allowed me to do here is actually I had the opportunity within our division, where I'm in Mojave's part of Inland Division, which is Needles all the way up to Bridgeport, right? Huge area, is go to each office. That's why I got up to Bodie and Bridgeport and help them with photography and recruiting. So it was kind of fun, but we'll see if we can take it statewide. We'll try. But no, but just slowing down, you know, you see, like I mentioned in the beginning, if you see us out there, you know, talk to us. You know, I always like to, this is my personal way of doing things. I always go, like if the sheriff's there, like, hey, can I take a picture of your car? You know, with the fire in the background. I can send it to you later if you want to. You know, I try to include them. You could be in the picture if you want to. That gives them the option, like, yes, I want a picture of me, or no, I don't. I want to stay out of it. But I go up and talk to them. They don't know who I am, because I'm not IDing myself when I'm off duty, right? But it can start the conversation too. You know, hey, I work for, you know, this, I do this, this is my business. You know, can I go take pictures inside there? You know, it's kind of a good conversation starter. But I always try to talk to them and ask them, and more times than not, they don't care. Yeah, sure, I'll just step aside, or yeah, sure, how do you want me to stand? Okay, we'll do this. You know, that's cool. You know, it really opens up a relationship there, and it really helps you down the road too, especially when you can start knowing people and building friendships and relationships. Looking around, you know, I keep mentioning that, always look around for safety and new perspectives, because you never know what you're going to miss. You know, I see it all the time, looking through my little viewfinders and trying to catch it, and then I look up and it's like, oh, look at that. You know, and maybe I missed it, maybe I didn't. I always like to go for the guaranteed, you know, you can't leave without shot, so to speak. And then I try experimenting, trying stuff. But I always like to slow down the shutter speed with patrol cars, and I like to, because that's what I do on my work social media pages, keep a focus on them and get the action. You know, you get the truck and the mud in the background. And this image is a little bit cropped. It's a much bigger image, but I needed it as a header up there. But you can see how deep the mud was back there based on the truck, and you can see the street sign just to the left of the truck. It was deep. It was very deep. And then you can see the car that drove itself into the mud on the other side of the freeway there. So that's a whole other story. Yeah. They couldn't get across that, and they had to wait 3 days for their car. Realize too, when we close roads, one of the hardest things that I do on the job is close a road. and inhibit people from traveling where they would like to travel, whether it be home, to the store, see family, you know, beach, desert, whatever it happens to be. Because it's always upsets people when a road closed and they have to go around or they don't know the way. So just try to be patient with everyone out there. Mentally, the hardest thing you ever do on my job is make death notifications, but physically, the hardest thing you ever do is close a road. Because it is absolutely exhausting, talking to people 12 hours a day for a straight 12 hours, telling them the road is closed and trying to verify who has the right to be in there and who does not. Because there's always, like I mentioned, there's always gonna be people taking advantage of it. And what we have to do is try to sift through that. And do we always make right decisions? No, we don't. You know, mistakes get made, but we try to do the best we can. And sometimes we, like myself included, you know, tell people to stay out that shouldn't be told that. So just take it with a grain of salt, take it for what it is and try to find a different spot. Personally, again, me, I don't show identifiable information when I'm taking pictures of stopped vehicles. I'll go back a couple slides. You can't see the face of the person inside that car. Okay, whether I'm on duty or off duty, I try to avoid all that stuff because I don't ever want to, whether they deserved it or not, I don't ever want to shame that person, right? If it's in some type of enforcement contact or some type of crash where they may be a victim, you know, somebody impaired hit them. Now they're a victim of a crime and that's an actual crime scene that I'm taking a picture of. Okay, I don't ever want to show those things. So I try to avoid stuff like that.
You blur the license plate.
Yes, yeah, so I'll blur license plates, yep, so that people can't look that up. I blur faces. I have to do that for work, but I try to do that on my own. And I try to stay on my own stuff. I try to stay away from the stuff anyway. You won't ever see CHP related stuff on my personal pages, because I have this as a side business, so I can't do that. But nonetheless, if it's like sheriff's department, you know, I try to blur identifiable information for people who are being there through an enforcement contact or a crash. Just because I don't want to publicly shame them. You know, some people don't care, but I'm just not comfortable myself. And then again, that's my personal opinion. Everybody has their own set of standards that they use. But that's just my personal opinion. And mostly that came from work because I can't do that at work. So here's another one, you know, slow down the shutter speed 1/100th of a second, right? I get all the lights in the car, not my car, so the headlight's not on, because I know you're looking. So, but I came across this driving across Chute J and say somewhere around 200th east. He had a Mustang out there stopped, and the sun was setting, so I pulled in a good distance in front of them. Don't ever stop. If you want to choose to do something like this, don't ever pull in right behind the officer or right in front of, because you don't know how they're going to react. Okay, they don't know who you are. So I have my big lens, so I can stop a little distance in front and get kind of a far away shot, so that I'm not posing a hazard or inhibiting anything they're doing. But it's kind of fun when the sun is right back there. And you can still do 1/100th of a second, and his frame still is fairly clear, right? Even though he's walking back to the car in this. So you can still get a decently clear shot even at 1/100th of a second. With and get all the lights on, except for the headlights. So, because I couldn't talk to him ahead of time, so.
No, brush fire is one thing, but on a traffic stop, are you gonna have an officer look at you weird if he doesn't know who you are looking?
Oh, he will look at you weird. Yes, yes, absolutely. I get that even from my own guys when I'm driving into work. And this happened the other day. So I'll tell the story since you brought it up, right? Driving into work like I normally do, just up 14. I set my cruise at a decent speed where I know I'm not gonna get stopped. And the car just blows by me in the one lane. Okay, well, next thing I know, I step back. Just before that, one of my partners driving an all white Charger, okay, except only markings it has are the door panels, California Highway Patrol, so nothing on the front or back, right? Had just passed me going the other direction. Well, as soon as he did that, another car blows my doors off going next to me, right? So then he comes by me, comes racing after. So he sees that car, he stops it, pulls off on the side of the road. Well, where he stopped is a very wide dirt turnout. So again, I'm not going to stop even though I know him, I know who he's my friend, I know who it is, I'm not going to stop next to him. Behind him, in front of him, next to him, anything. I'm keeping my distance because I don't know what's gonna happen, right? I'm there to help if need be, but I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't wanna interfere. So I stop back a little ways. He gets out of his car, and first thing he does is look back at me like, who is this guy? Who is stopping? Because now he's thinking too, are they together? That happens quite a bit, especially when I work New Hall area on the 5. You stop one car, you get 5 cars to stop because they're all driving from San Diego to San Francisco, but then he sees who it is and, he laughs, but still, it makes you question. But he is going to look at you funny, but as long as you're not approaching, you're not interfering, you're fine. Keep your distance. That's why I use my big lens. I'll never use my little ones and get up close unless I'm in uniform, in which case it's only for work. It's not for personal stuff, which all these pictures are for work. But also gives a nice compression too when you're using a big lens, and especially out in the desert where it's flat and long. You get a really nice compression. You get the windmills in the back or the mountains in the background. You get the car and you're a little bit away. So I love those shots, and you get all the lights on the car and the headlights glistening. I don't know. I love that stuff. So you will get those weird looks, but as long as you're at a distance and you're not interfering, you're okay. Yeah. And if he comes and talks to you afterwards, like I said, just be cordial and be polite. Hey, this is my ID, this is my name, this is what I'm doing. I do photography as a business, and this is it. Okay, have a nice day. Thank you. Maybe hey, do you mind if I see it? Yeah, sure. You want a copy? I have no problem. I offer that to the deputies when I see them. I'm taking their pictures. So, and none of them know me. So, yeah. Mentioned stars because you're talking about your Milky Way stuff. So I did not turn the lights on in this one. I'm sorry. But talking about emergency vehicles and taking pictures, even at night, they can turn out pretty nice. It's actually a double exposure. Kind of hard to see, but in the upper right, you got a meteor coming through. You can see an Andromeda galaxy on the upper left, and then the car there out at Red Rock. And the passing cars make a really nice. They really highlight that canyon, those canyon walls nice. But you have to take 2 exposures, one for the stars and one for the lights on the car. So
Is that
I'm gonna come
the
back.
north part of the-
Right.
Yes, it's facing north. Yeah. So I can't.
We shot with the Wilkins that night.
It's the other side.
Yeah. I know where it is.
That's right.
It's not the Galaxy Center.
No.
It's the other side.
Yeah.
It is,
Yes, you're correct. Yes. Yeah. So it's kind of fun when you I take it, slow down in life and slow down your shutter speed too, especially with emergency vehicles, because you get all those lights, and I love it when you can see all the lights shining. So, but that's my personal opinion. That's my preference. So just some fun stuff to share there. So talking about being at a closure and you can't get in, right? I got in here, but before I did, I wanted to make sure I got one of our cars in the picture, right, to document them being there. If you can't get through, take some pictures of the road being closed. Get the car on the shot, and you can see the smoke in the background, Hall ambulance right there, and sheriff's deputy down the road. Something different, kind of fun, and just trying to take advantage of a situation that the situation that's in front of you. I edit all my photos too, on a photography note through Lightroom, predominantly on my phone, because I'm always on the go with the 8 kids and working long days. I'm always on the go, so every chance you get, every opportunity you get to sit down and edit, I'm pulling up my phone and working on a picture or two. And it can do really amazing things. So there's another one, right? Get a flood when Red Rock Randsburg got washed out. Same time as where the Big Root got stuck. If any of you are familiar, that road washes out every time it rains. If you ever travel up there, so we always try to document that. And I was hoping for a little more water in there. I'll be honest, but you gotta work with the situation that's in front of you. So again, slowing down the shutter for the lights also made give the water some movement, which is kind of neat. And then it's a challenge to see how slow you can do it and stand on one little piece of asphalt without falling in the mud in a uniform in a belt. So, that's a whole other challenge, but, it's always kind of fun. It's our way of showing, the CHP Mojave way of showing, hey, the road's closed. Because we get, we'll get inundated with phone calls, what's wrong with the road? Is the road really closed? How bad is the road? So this way it gives us a good visual representation. The road is non-existent. So I don't know what to tell you. But what's that?
Went off on vacation.
Yeah. Yes, it did. It really did. It does that every time it rains up there, unfortunately. But just looking for those new perspectives and like I said, including cars and being safe. We get people out there that want to take pictures of this stuff too. And above all, it's just being safe. When you're dealing with washed out roads, you got to be careful because you may see asphalt under your feet, but what's under the asphalt? Nothing. Yeah. We've had, but several years ago, it was really good video. May have been a decade now. In Santa Barbara, when they had some really heavy rainstorms, Santa Barbara area, and there's some pretty severe flooding. One of our cars going up a road to do evacuations. And then all you see coming down the road is water and debris. And pretty soon you can tell the car is just floating. And it's just floating sideways down the road at this point. And it pushed it far enough along where they're able to get traction and, get out of there. But I say that to be careful because even as, a first responder going into this stuff, where we're trying to get to people knowing the risks, it's even a greater risk when you don't have what we have, a radio that you can immediately pick up from it. If you're going to these places to take pictures, be careful. If you go to see washed out roads, make sure you're looking what's underneath the road because there was a good, 4-foot section where there's asphalt, but then it's like a 3 or 4 foot drop into the mud. And that may not be much, but even a short fall, if you're falling down, that can hurt. You can still break a leg that way. You can really mess up a back. You can do a lot of damage. So just be cognizant of where you're stepping, where you're walking, and where you're going. And don't think that the dirt around the road is safe to travel because if it's been washed out, it's probably still just a little bit muddy as you try to cross it. And chances are your car's going to get stuck unless it's really meant for that type of thing. So just be careful. And then that's about it, unless you guys have any questions. That's my personal Instagram and Facebook page, and then CHP Mojave. I highly encourage everyone to follow that. We try to give out traffic tips and we share current events, especially during the winter. I like to do video updates if the freeways are ever closed. 58, because when it snows, sometimes we have to close it because people crash. It's the nature of the beast. We hate doing it, like I said, but sometimes we have to. But that's the fastest way to get information regarding the Mojave area, Kern County area. And then of course my personal page up there where I like to do aviation photography with a little bit of landscape. And then one of my favorite pictures from work of all time is this one. That's why I threw it in at the end. Out there at Roy's with the headlights on and all the lights. I made sure everything was shining. Got the sun just between the car and the light bar there, which I thought was kind of fun. So definitely had some fun at work with this stuff. So
Nice scene.
thank you. But did anyone have any questions or any comments? Anything they want to add? Their experiences? I wanted to leave a little extra time in case somebody. What kind of planes? A little bit of everything. Yes, there's a lot of experimental, small and large. There's still a lot of military aircraft that fly through there from time to time. The Navy's progressing from F-18s to F-35, so we're seeing a lot of those more. But we still get F-18s from time to time, but it's a lot of experimental. Straddle launch, sure, I know a lot of you have been up there before when they've flown. That's one giant, now 2 giant experimental aircraft that they have because they bought the Virgin Galactic 747. So now they have both of those, so it's kind of cool. But there's a lot going on up there. So it's a very fun place to be if you ever end up. It's very hit and miss. We can go all week and won't see a single thing flying except for maybe a Cessna. And then the next week we'll have, C-17s, F-35s and straddle launches flying. And, we've got other aircraft in the area, experimental aircraft flying through there. So you just never know what you're gonna get, but it's a lot of fun.
We went on a field trip to Alabama Hills, we saw a plane, we could swear it's like the SR-71 second version going 4,000, that thing was really moving. Whatever, it was really dark, whatever it is, really.
Yeah, they have quite a bit. Some of it's,
That, that's kind of top secret, I guess.
yeah, it was now. Thank you. This is live stream, so now we all know. No, there's definitely some very cool, projects going on up there.
We were out there and I saw that plane, it was just amazingly fast.
Yeah, and you'll see even the Navy flies their F-35s through there a lot. Man, those guys, they're not quite low level status, but Sidewinder status, but they're low and they're just rocking up 14. And I've seen them cut left in the Joplin Canyon. And man, it's incredible. It is so cool to watch them do that. But there's a lot of fun stuff up there. Like I said, very hit and miss, so you never know what you're gonna get. I like going to a Voyager restaurant and you hang out there and you see something taxi by and like, okay, time to pay the bill and go. Go out to the end of the runway.
What time we were going, I think on that valley, we were going up to, what's that canyon when you go the back way, and there was an F-18, there were like 2 of them flying in the canyon or something. They're always around and they're pretty cool. Never know when you're gonna see them.
You're right. And today, in fact, at work, there were two, one Edwards and I don't know where the other one was from, but 2 C-17s flying maybe 1,000 feet off the ground, just east of Mojave. Coming out from Edwards, and they're just doing some type of, I'm sure they're testing something because Edwards is a test base, but you could see it from the office and it's, am I seeing this right? Man, that's low. And so every once in a while they'll come through Mojave too, and it's always fun. You never know what you're gonna get. You have to be careful too around Mojave. I'll mention this because they are, and we talked about this at dinner. They're building a lot of solar fields out there now. So a lot of the area where you used to be able to go or can still go is going to be off limits here soon because it's going to be private property. And it's going to be filled with solar fields. So they're doing construction work. Be cognizant of that if you guys ever go out there because they will chase you off their grounds now. And there's a railroad there. So be careful of being on railroad property, especially if a train is coming because they do report that when people are on the tracks. So just be careful, If you hear something coming, move, what I'm saying? Always keep an eye and an ear out and stay off the tracks. So
How do you feel about drones?
drones? In what way? Used for what way? What's that?
Gathering photographs.
I personally, I don't care. If I see a drone, I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. I hope he's getting a good video. I'd like to see that later. You have to be careful where you fly them, make sure it's done legally. Over freeways and stuff like that. Don't be flying it over the freeway. Don't be flying it around airports, obviously. Fires, you got to keep the drones on the ground. You can't fly a drone. Anytime there might be aircraft in the air for any reason, you have to keep it down. We use them like for the floods for getting a visual of the road conditions. Because a car may or may not be able to do it. We don't want to risk it. So we'll call in an airship and we'll fly it and we'll check up the mountain and stuff like that. So just be cognizant of that. If you have one or going to use it, make sure you're going by. And I'm not familiar with all the FAA guidelines on drones because I don't have one. But make sure you're going by those guidelines. Don't get in trouble for that stuff. But especially around fires or freeways, keep it down. Because it creates a hazard. So.
Say, don't fly your drone at Bogey because they'll give you tickets for there at one time.
State park,
Yeah.
can't fly drones.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would get a ticket.
Or not.
Yeah, I think both of them, yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Like we said in the beginning, be prepared, know the laws, do some research beforehand. If you have any questions, if you're going, say to Bodie or going wherever you happen to be going, call and ask. I've talked to those guys because I made the trip up there and made some friends. They actually turned out to be very nice and very helpful and very knowledgeable. And I've talked to some of the rangers up at Yosemite about the project that got canceled, but that we were working on. And they were all very nice. They're more than happy to help. It's just a matter of, in some cases, getting a hold of someone because some of these parks are so overwhelmed with phone calls and visitors that they're just really busy. They don't have enough staffing.
Are they requiring photo permits?
Photo permits. What do you mean?
For, you know, if you were
Commercial.
just to take, to go out and take photographs in any, state?
That's a good question. I don't have an answer to that.
Because I
We,
know you do have to have one for beaches, because we always had to get. our
Right.
permits to
Oh, for
photograph
commercial?
before. Right, but if you're photographing for a business, it's commercial.
right. Yeah, I don't have an answer to that because we don't get involved in that aspect. There is a California State Parks Division. They would probably have an answer to that if you're talking about in a state park. You know, if it's a natural disaster or a newsworthy event, you know, then you don't need one. When you're going to document something that's newsworthy, that's completely separate than doing, you know, portraits in a national state or national park.
I
You know.
just read something because I'm thinking about getting a drone. That if you use your drone to make money, the leading number that they have over there has to be registered with the FAA.
Okay,
It has to
there
be
you go.
registered.
So you have to register it with the FAA if you're
Yeah.
using it for business purposes.
Yeah.
Can't put them up at night unless you have a specific type of, our son has a license.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I don't have a drone and we don't, with the CHP, we don't deal with drones too often. I can't even think in 15 years of a single case where a drone has been an issue for us. Yeah, so to be fair, I don't, you know, and I don't have an answer to the permitting question. So, but we can find out by talking to state parks.
They're gonna be sophisticated with the drones, like my daughter had one, every upgrade on the current software upgrade. It restricts more and more of the area that the drone can fly.
Okay,
So it actually will stop you from more than 50 feet up. Or some other limitations depending on where you are, and it is more aggressive in our area that they're cordoning off.
right. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Now, how efficient do your credentials have to be to get into it?
So that's gonna be a little more subjective. I can't, I'm sorry.
Okay, man.
Sure, that would work. You might get a ride where you don't want to go.
Again.
Just you, don't worry about it. No, so that's a little bit subjective, and that's why I say go be prepared to be professional. Unless you have like a specific press pass or media pass from a news outlet or news organization, a magazine, something like that, you know, be prepared. Say, hey, this is my business. Here's my business card. Excuse me.
I'm thinking with the internet, there are bloggers and, you know, but they're actually getting the information out there.
Right.
Yeah, and it all depends on being professional, okay? Like I teach our guys, you know, ask questions. Like I mentioned, do you have a business card? Do you have a place where you're gonna share this stuff? You know, how is this gonna be documented? Not necessarily how you're gonna portray it, because we don't care, but is this gonna go online? Is this gonna go to a magazine? Is this gonna go to a newspaper? Is this gonna go to a TV station? That's what I mean by that. What's the end goal with this? You know, is this just for your personal and you can't show me any of that? Then no, you're staying here. Because we need to regulate how many people are getting in there.
If it's for a contest,
But if you're, you know, like make business cards aren't too expensive to make, you know, have some business cards made up, you know, have, like mine's simple, Maurer 8, number 8 for my kids' photography, you know, and so I can say, hey, look, this is my business, you know, I make money on this. Here's where I share stuff, and this is my press pass for the magazine that I take photographs for, you know, and even then it still doesn't work. Like I said, I've been turned away, and so I try to just get a name, you know, if it's really an issue, but for me, I just go somewhere else, because there's plenty of ways to find plenty of roads to find your way around out here, you know.
Now, when you're turned away, and you ask the officer for the name, doesn't that ratchet it up a notch a little bit, or?
Sure, but we are all required to provide that, so I get asked that, even though I'm inside the office, I still get asked that because of my position in public information officer. 10 times a day. So it is what it is. Well, what's your name and ID? Because they don't like how I answered a question on the phone. I don't care. Yeah. And we're not doing anything wrong, it is what it is. So you ask that, it doesn't, you really ratchet stuff up when you start arguing, and then that creates a problem. And you may be in the right, okay? But when you start arguing, it creates a problem, and then you end up going to the other side. So that's why I say, if it's really that much of an issue, you can always get a name. We have name tags with our ID numbers on them that are clearly visible on our uniforms. You could jot it down, you know what I mean? Ask them real quick, and then thank you, sir, ma'am, whatever, and get out of there, go to a different spot, and then make a phone call the next week, and say, hey, look, I shoot for this. Because I had this conversation too. I was contacted by someone from LA that said they sent a photographer up to catch the fire on the west side of Lancaster, one of them, and they were turned away. They said they were turned away by one of your officers. Well, it turned out it was a volunteer from a different office that had come up to help. So, but it is what it is. It happens. And we have to deal with it after the fact. But they just turned around and went on their way, because you're just wasting time at that point. If you're going to argue, you're not going to change someone's mind, and you're just wasting an opportunity for you to get pictures, somewhere else. So I just get a name and ID, and you can call the office the next week with your credentials and, have a conversation with someone. And, hopefully it becomes a training issue, down the road. So, yeah.
Yeah, Jerry was asked to, by a local newspaper, local magazine to go photograph the local parks in here. And he was up photographing the last park, and he came back and go back down to the studio, and he got followed by the sheriff's car. And the guy stopped him and he asked him for his credentials and why he was photographing up there, because a citizen had said there's a guy out there with a great big long lens on his camera photographing children.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Stuff like that happens. People get very concerned, especially with the bigger lenses. They get very concerned, and that happens. And if you have an email that you can save or print it out just in case you don't have reception, because there's still a lot of places out here where there's no reception, print it out and keep it with you. Hey, look, this is what I'm doing. I have a contract with this magazine or this city, and I'm getting pictures of this. And I'll tell people, like, I've been at Palmdale, okay, taking pictures of aircraft, and I was approached outside the base, completely outside the base, by someone from the base. Hey, what are you doing out here? Hey, well, this is what I'm doing, and I'll show them the pictures. I don't care, create a friendship out of it. And then you end up knowing someone else. So, I try to handle everything very casually, but respectfully, and make sure I keep all my documentation that I need to make sure that I'm doing things properly and legally, And if you have a problem with how it was handled, phone call when it's all said and done is the best option to handle things. Phone call to the office. Yeah.
Studio. Big name, obviously.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yes. It all depends on. I shoot with Nikon, so I don't know how many of you. I see some claps and I see some people shaking their heads. I gotta walk out of here. So, what's that? There's so few of us. I know there's a couple people in here that like Nikon. So I use Nikon. And I'm fortunate enough to have one of my first lenses that I absolutely loved was a Sigma 60-600. I love that thing because I could use it for work, get relatively close, stuff like this, and then I could do far away stuff of, aircraft in the sky. I absolutely love that thing. I have different lenses now that I use, but that was a great lens for me to start with. Everything's an investment, my personal philosophy, and again, this is my personal thoughts, are buy the best that you can at the moment, or save up to what you want. I don't like to compromise, because if I get something that I can't quite afford that one, so I'm gonna get this one instead. but then I'm taking pictures and I'm like, well, maybe I would have gotten in if I had that lens instead. I start doubting myself in the back of my mind, so that's my own problem, but I start doubting myself. So if I can get the best lens that I can at the moment, like this is the best one I can get, so I'm buying this one. And the image still doesn't look good, well, who's to blame? That's all me. I can't blame the camera equipment at that point, and I love that lens. I mean, that was great. I know a lot of aviation photographers that use it. Where the 150 to 600 is another very popular one. But I had it for Nikon, and man, that thing served me well for a very long time. So
Buy the best, try only once.
there you go. Buy the best and cry only once. I like it. That's how you do it. But I don't know if you use Canon or Nikon or Sony or what your Canon. Okay, yeah. Okay. We're gonna move on then. No, a lot of my friends, in fact, one of my good friends uses David. He uses Canon. Now you're laughing, but you can get they have some really good products out there, some really good lenses, but do your research ahead of time and figure out what you want to take pictures of and find the best lens that fits that. And for me, it was aircraft, like I said in the beginning, aviation, aside of landscape, because every once in a while you like to take a sunset or sunrise or moon shot or something like that. But my focus is work, pictures like this, and then fast jets. So, yeah. Anybody else have any questions, comments, experiences they'd like to share?
I was gonna ask you, how was the focus speed on this 600?
It was pretty good. Yeah, it's not, I have a prime lens for Nikon, a 500, and that thing's, it's unbeatable, but it comes at a cost.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm coughing.
That's why you don't have Nigel.
Yeah, but I did buy it used. That's another thing. You buy something used, it's literally half the cost. Especially when it's an older lens, it's half the cost, so I can afford it now. And that's something you save up for. I used the 60 to 600 for a long time, and I saved up for my prime for aviation, and it was worth every penny because it's pretty impressive and pretty fast. So, yes, sir.
Does the CHP fly out of Lancaster, Palmdale, Bond?
So
Airplanes are helicopters?
only as a refueling stop. Yeah, our inland division, air operations is actually out of Apple Valley. I'm sorry. So if any of you go to the Apple Valley Air Show, they're right there next to the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. They share a wall and a hangar. So that's where we're located out of. They do come to Lancaster every once in a while, but only as a refueling location. So say they get a call in Lancaster or Palmdale, and you get a service for an hour. Now you need gas. That's the only time they stop there. So, and then Southern Division, which is LA, their air operations all the way down to Fullerton. So they got some time to get up here. So you're more likely to see someone out of our division come down here than you are to see someone come up from Fullerton. So.
I have a question on our little Apollo Park, and they have the water dropping in the helicopter. Actually flew in and dropped. I didn't get a picture because it landed so fast. So do they do that practice? You guys come up there or go down there and get water drops and stuff?
So our helicopters, CHP, don't do any fire work. We don't do any water drops. We're search and rescue, medevac, and enforcement. And what's cool about our air ops in inland division is actually they're I think one of two. It's the Navy. We're the only two, I believe, that will fly up to Mount Whitney to do a rescue. They'll go all the way to the top of the mountain to pull people off the mountain.
Hero stars.
So, yeah. So we're the only two rated to do that. So it's kind of cool. And they're out of Apple Valley. So they'll go up to Bishop, refuel, pull the SAR team on board, and then fly up there. And then if we can't do it, the Navy goes out there to do it, their next call. But it has to go civilian first before it can go to military. But sometimes we're on a call, something like that. So they fly up there frequently too. And they get a much bigger, and I love my department, but we're helicopter. China Lake, yes. Yeah, China Lake. Yep. They have their search and rescue, but they go up there. So yeah, that's another great group of guys. So yeah, we don't do the water dropping. San Bernardino County Sheriff, their helicopters, and Kern County Fire, obviously. they do rescues and, water drops. So their helicopters are fit for both purposes. So. But we do joint practice with other departments from time to time, so. And if you're ever up in Bishop, I know once a year, I've never gotten the heads up, although I'd like to. They go up and do hoist rescues at the park in Bishop. So to work with Inyo County Search and Rescue. So if you're ever up there and see a helicopter near the golf course, I'm told might be a fun time to stop for the day. Get to know some people, maybe get a challenge coin or a patch, you never know. So it's pretty good. Anyone else have any? Yes, sir.
Kind of a weird question. You said you were doing like speed with, long lens. Does that mean you're pulling on a tripod and just stand over it or bracing against the car?
It depends on the wind. If there's a little wind, I rarely use, in this case with this picture that's on there, I use a tripod, because I was just stationary, just waiting. But most of the time when I'm out doing stuff, it's more dynamic, so I'm hand holding everything. I tried using monopod in the beginning, and I just wasn't comfortable with it. I didn't like it, so I just hand hold everything. And if it happens to be windy, you'll see me tuck in. Thankfully, I'm not, very tall or anything, so I can tuck in next to the car and lean against it on the non-wind side and brace myself. So that helps too, or find something to lean against. So I'll often brace myself or sit on the ground. Because then that creates a cool perspective, when you're lower to the ground instead of just handheld where everybody does it. It kind of creates a nice perspective. So,
Like that.
yeah. So it just depends. The wind is everything out here, especially when you get up to Mojave. So, yeah.
We'll tell them to turn the fans off.
Well, I still haven't found that person. If you have a name, I'd like to find out. He'll be happy to know he's been mentioned tonight more than once. Oh, good. In fact, funny story, the first time I met him, David, I was using a monopod, and you'll notice I got sandals on, right? Because I don't wear shoes. He was like, who's this kid out here in sandals with this giant camera, a bunch of kids, and a monopod trying to take pictures? So I had all my kids and we were going out to a fire to take pictures down the street from where we were, so. They're all running around, then they start hopping in a patrol car, and he's like, what is going on here? So. Any other comments, questions? Right, I think that about sums it up. I brought a little bit of swag up here for you guys from the CHP. There's a few stickers, a couple flashlights, a couple pens, and a couple lanyards, so I'll leave it up to you guys to see who can get up here the fastest. Or if you want to be kind and pass it back, but I do have a few things up here for you guys if you guys want to grab anything. It's just on behalf of the CHP Mojave area, just something to remind you guys, be safe when we're out here, because ultimately that's our goal, is to make sure everybody's safe, and that's all I want you guys to do, is just be safe and have fun doing what we like to do, take pictures. So thank you.
Great.
You're all kinds of stuff. I never thought I would be this old and running towards fires and things. But hey, thank you so much for being here tonight, Aaron, and give her another round of applause. We don't have to have her till 8, so if you want to hang out and talk or whatever, you want to ask him questions one-on-one. Are you? What? Oh, wait, 15 minutes. Oh, yes, that clock's bad. So 15 minutes. I hate that clock. So, let's tear down and be out of here before 8 o'clock. Thank you.
There you go. Yeah. Give it about 5 minutes to cool down. All right.
So keep the grants.